Good morning and welcome back to the Blunicorn Ultima Evolution build. My name is Humble. As you can see, we got the car behind me. I haven't been filming as much as before, really, early on in the build, somewhat due to frustration. As you can see, there's just not much progress on the car that I've made, at least visually. And it's kind of disheartening or disenfranchising, and this happens, I think, to everyone on every build when you put in the hours and you don't see progress. But I know the finish line is in sight. Like for instance, today I'm working on the fuel system, which, well, we need to start the car, and it's just a lot of tedious work, making hoses, putting fuel pumps together. Let me show you what I've been working on. So down here, that's all for the fuel system, all of that. So we have a lift pump, we have a couple of fuel filters, we have our stainless braided PTFE line. Lots of fittings, -6 fittings, -8 fittings, and then there's some -10 that you can't see here. We have a fuel pressure regulator, a couple of mounts, well, ignore these, this is for the airbox. But where all this needs to go is right back here in the back of the car, either down here against the firewall or over there against the firewall, or up in this area, actually on the rear bulkhead. You can see that I've already done our tank link, which is this -10 line that goes all the way across and it meets up over there. And there's 2 lines on the bottom of the tank that link the tanks together. There's that -10 line, and then there's this -8 that I'm working on, which is this 90-degree fitting there, you can see. And there's a T that will be right here in the middle that links the 2 tanks and then goes to our lift pump, which is this guy, through a 90-degree connector. And then, actually, sorry, it'll go through a fuel filter first, then the lift pump, and then through a smaller, more fine particulate fuel filter, and then it comes into this guy over here. So this is the inside. Normally it sits inside of this little sump tank. This is an 034 Motorsport sump and kind of like sump tank / fuel pump kit. And what it does is this whole thing is just full of fuel, and then there's a pickup on the very bottom of it. You can see it there. So this thing can either stand up or it can lay sideways, but I think for my application I'm going to stand it up on the firewall. So this is full of fuel. This is my high pressure pump, and this pump will go out to the fuel pressure regulator and to the engine and the fuel rails, and then finally return back down to the tanks. But because of the higher G-load and higher forces on the car, I thought it was apt to run one of these guys. I had one in my last race car, and it solved a lot of fuel starvation issues, at least for me. But you have to worry about how you plumb these, because you don't want to have hot fuel circling back into this and just heat soaking, and then pretty soon you'll be vapor locking because the fuel itself is so hot, like 200 degrees or something like that. So you want to try to avoid that. So in my case, instead of returning fuel back to this from the fuel pressure regulator, I'm going to return it back to the fuel tanks where it can cool off, since the tanks, as you can see, are right here in the side pods, and they will have fresh air and cold air blowing over the tank. And then on the back side of the tanks back here, I'm going to put a heat shield to keep heat from the headers and the side of the engine, abate as much of that as I can. So that's what I'm working on today. I'm going to show you how to make some of these lines that I'm working on. I'm going to show you how we put that sump tank and the fuel pumps together, as well as maybe some of the iterations for how the fuel system is going to be plumbed, and see if some of that will make sense for you. Quick update, kind of jumping around with the build, jumping from project to project as I hit blocks, and I'll show you what I mean. As you can see, the engine has been pulled off of its shipping crate and just set off to the side. It's actually been in and out of the car a couple times now, but I'll show you what I was working on. We have our engine mounts on, and then down here is the intake and output for the dry sump pump. Actually, for the dry sump L7, it comes out of the side of the pan like that. And I was going to pop the AN adapter on there, but when I pulled the plug, there's a bunch of oil in the oil pan, so I stuffed the plug back in, and I'll have to take care of that later once I have something I can catch all the oil with. I didn't know these motors ship with oil, and we've come across that a couple of times, like putting the flywheel on, and I thought we'd had all the oil drained out, but there's still some oil left in the pan. So I tried to mount the factory AC compressor bracket, which is this guy here, and normally it would mount on the side of the block here, but as you can see, it hits the engine mount, so that's no good. The Ultima does ship with another one, but I seem to have lost it, and if you watch the time lapse, you'll be able to see me run around for a few minutes looking for it, and I have no idea where that went. I finally got a new alternator in, and I'll show you the problems I ran into. Nowhere in the documentation does it say anything about which components you need to fit on the engine, or what will fit or what doesn't. Most of the instructions or what have you just tell you to get the American Speed engine or something like that. It doesn't actually say which alternator or which AC compressor you need. So this was a bit of trial and error. So this alternator is from the Corvette LS accessory kit. This is meant for the LS7 and the, I believe it's the C6Z06 with the LS7 engine. This is a truck alternator for like an LS1, LS2 series engine, and this is actually the truck location, which is down next to the block. Typically for the Corvette alternator, it mounts much higher up in this area over the head, but that interferes with the dry sump tank location. So there is a truck bracket that fits in this area, and it mounts just like this, and there's an idler wheel that goes on here. But I found this, I think it's an ICT billet alternator mount. I don't remember the cost, but it was less than $100. It was, I want to say like 60 or 70 shipped. And it mounts to this alternator perfectly. This location is just right. If you look, the spacers for the kit go behind the alternator. And there's this longer spacer that fits in back here. And then you have your serpentine belt, which will come down around here, up and over the idler pulley that goes here, and then under the water pump. Some people express concern that because the belt is only touching the pulley down in this area and then up and over here, that there might be some water pump slippage. So that's something I'm going to need to watch for and listen for. But from everything I've seen online in LS swaps and whatnot, people who do the power steering pump elimination don't seem to have any issues with a limited amount of belt on the water pump. On the other side of the engine, which is down in this area, there is the AC compressor, which I don't have handy, but there is a much larger compressor that comes with, again, the LS7 accessory kit, and again, it doesn't fit. In fact, nothing really from the LS7 accessory kit will fit this application, so I would highly recommend not buying it. You can save quite a bit of money just by getting the individual components and piecing it together yourself, like the idle tensioner, truck, again, another truck part, a truck AC compressor. I'm looking for a part number, but I'm not seeing it. But this is another truck compressor, and Ultima does ship a mount that bolts to the side of the block down here for this style of compressor. I just lost it like an idiot. I really think that it may have accidentally been thrown out when we were clearing boxes, which is unfortunate. So instead, I picked up the Dirty Dingo mount, which looks exactly like, oh, there we go, the factory Ultima parts, just finished in black instead of zinc coating. Honestly, I'm a little partial to this black powder coat finish. I think it looks a lot nicer. Not that you can see it tucked under the engine, but I think the black looks a lot sharper than this zinc oxide finish. So next up is I'm going to see about getting the AC compressor put on the block, and it'll be ready to drop down into the engine bay again, and we can test fit it down in this area. And why that matters is that's not the final location for the fuel pump, but that area is going to be very hot because of the header's proximity. And I need to make sure that I have enough room for fuel pumps and fuel filters, as well as this oil to water heat exchanger. So there's going to be some more on that here.